Hello and welcome to the first podcast of 2021 from About Manchester. Today we talk to Nick Buckley MBE. Nick is the Chief Executive of the Manchester charity Mancunian Way. He set up the charity 9 years ago with his redundancy money and savings after leaving Manchester Council. The charity describes itself as community engagement specialists. It was set up after the Manchester riots in the summer of 2011, in its words, to ensure that the next generation of Mancunians didn't find themselves making the same mistakes as the small minority that went before. Last summer, Nick found himself in hot water after he wrote a blog post criticising aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement. In 5 short weeks, his life was turned upside down. Since then, he has become a champion of the right to free speech, is in the process of writing a book, and has set up a new website. Tell us a bit about you. You've set up this new sort of website, haven't you, which people have to subscribe to. And I think one of the things I certainly read, it might have been something you put on Twitter, that you were going to open the doors on practices in the council.
Yes, so I've created a Patreon account, which is a subscription service. So it starts at £3 a month. So on there, I'm putting on articles. I'm going to do some videos, writing about different stuff. And one of the stuff someone asked me to write about a couple of weeks ago was my time at the council. And what have I seen at the council which people need to know about. So I'm going to write a series of articles around waste and incompetence. And I wrote one the other day, which is on Patreon. And that was basically about a £1 picture frame I wanted to buy to put a certificate in that I wasn't allowed to buy in the shop and had to go through the council procurement system, which cost £15.
Okay. You were made, just to let people know, you were made redundant from the council about 9 years ago, and then you used your redundancy money to set up your charity Mancunian Way. Can you tell us a little bit about the charity?
Absolutely. So I'd spent a decade working for Manchester Council in their crime and disorder team. So most of my work there was around stopping young people getting involved in crime and antisocial behaviour. So the theory behind that was, we usually know the families where the young person in that family will eventually go down the wrong path and will end up arresting and prosecuting. So if we know this at 10, 11, 12, 13, why aren't we doing something about it? And why we're waiting till they're 18 and we've got enough to arrest them. So my job was all around early intervention, getting there early, getting the parents on board, and making sure the child was challenged every time they did something wrong, and just making that child know that there's consequences to their actions. And it was hugely successful over the decade I was there. And then when redundancy came along, I took voluntary redundancy because my job and all the prevention work was all cancelled at the council due to the big cuts that got from central government. And I decided to carry on that work. So I took my money and my life savings and I set up a charity which I funded for the first 2 years while we were trying to get grants. And we started working on the streets. So we started working in the streets across Greater Manchester in the tough areas with the tough kids. The kids who'd been kicked out of school, the kids who'd been kicked out of the local youth clubs, who were hanging around and making life up as they went along, making their own rules up. And our job on the streets was try to give them some advice and guidance, and just to let them know that this great country has so many opportunities, but there's no point having opportunities on offer if you've never been taught how to spot those opportunities. And that's what we do. So all the work we do is on the streets, in the parks, on the street corner, outside off licenses. And it's about, where do you want to go in life and how you're going to get there. And we can help you get there. You want to get into college, or you just want a paying job right now, we'll get you a job. And it's about giving them real life solutions to where they want to go, instead of them just drifting, thinking selling a bit of cannabis is the only way. And we're trying to give them some real solutions to real life problems. And again, along the way, we tell them, life's hard, mate. Don't think life's easy. And you're not a victim. You live in the 5th richest country in the world. We've got millions of immigrants trying to sneak in every day. They all get jobs. They all have a good life. You just need to reevaluate your attitude and your outlook in life. And we can help you with this. And that's the sort of work we do on the streets.
Are you worried that the events of the last 12 months are going to set these projects back?
For us as a small charity, we're fine. We're still running. We've run almost all the way through COVID. We're working on the streets. How it has affected us is there is no job opportunities at the moment. There's not been for about, since March last year. Mm-hmm. Nobody at the moment has got extra positions to take on our young people when you've got, people with a good working track record who need jobs as well. So there's not the job market is collapsed for us. It's hard for some of these young people as well, because a lot of the services they were engaged in, a lot of them have stopped as well, because mm-hmm. It's all face-to-face services. We're one of the only services that hasn't stopped because all our work's outside. Yeah. It's a lot easier and safer to work outside. What's going to happen this year, there was a report the other day that they reckon 25% of all youth charities in England this year are going to go.
Gosh.
25%. We won't be one of them. We're financially okay. But this COVID pandemic is going to leave so many holes to fill over the next few years. And we're going to be paying for this for the next decade.
At least.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost, it's almost got the potential to kill a generation off, hasn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, we called the last decade, a decade of austerity. We've got at least another decade of austerity coming, at least another. They're not going to call that austerity. I'm not sure where this is going to lead. You look at the pubs and clubs and restaurants in Manchester City Centre, most of them will never open again. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of work with the building trade. That's how we get most of our young people jobs, labouring, cleaning on building sites. Because that's the sort of work that they like to do. It's outside, it's hands-on, it's not sat behind a desk inputting data. All our partners there have all said they're taking no one on the foreseeable. They're letting people go. Their future contracts have all been postponed because who wants to build a tower block at the moment, because we're not even sure how many office staff are going to return. Do we need any more offices in the city? Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure where this is going to lead.
It's Manchester's growth and success in the last 25 years has been centred on the city centre, hasn't it? Really, in terms of people working there, people living there, people coming in to enjoy themselves. Do you think that economic model's gone?
It looks like it at the moment.
Will it come back?
Who knows? I mean, the Manchester City Centre was always going to reach a point where it was at capacity. Nobody knew when that was, but you can't always be building tower blocks and apartments forever. It'd have to stop at some point. Maybe this is it. We need to look at how businesses and office staff are going to carry on working over the next couple of years. I'm being told by several businesses that they're not going to bring some of their staff back to a anyway, and they're looking at downsizing their offices to save money. Living in the city centre is mainly appealing for two reasons. One, if you live in the city, if you work in the city centre, why not live there and you can walk to work in 4 minutes? Mm-hmm. And the other benefit is if you're young and you enjoy partying, why not live in the city centre? So if you're not going to be based employment-wise in the city centre anymore, why live there? And if there's nowhere to go out because the nighttime economy has disappeared or completely shrunk and rents aren't going to go down, then I'm not sure what the benefits of living in the city centre may be in the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have an alternative? Do you think there's other ways that we could be utilising the assets of the city centre moving forward? And maybe that this pandemic has sort of brought forward what was always going to be an inevitable thing anyway.
That's a huge question.
It is a huge question.
Yeah, huge question. Yeah, and to be honest, I've never given it any thought.
Okay.
I'd like to think the council have.
Yeah.
I doubt it, but I'd like to think the council have put a strategy, a plan together over the last couple of decades about what do we do when we reach peak capacity. I'd like to think there's a plan there, but I doubt it very much.
You tried to stand as a councillor, didn't you? Was it 3 years ago now? 4 years ago?
Yeah, three years ago.
On the homeless ticket, it wasn't the most successful, although you generated a lot of output.
I did. One of the projects my charity run as well is around homelessness in Manchester, because that's something I look at and I feel ashamed. And I still feel ashamed today when I see people sleeping on the streets. And 3 years ago, having spent years working on the streets with my charity, working with homeless people, getting them into accommodation, I came to the conclusion that this 3 years ago was easily solved. We just need to change what we were doing, and we were just carrying on doing the same thing we've always done, and we were getting the same results, which were poor.
What was that?
Well, we always look at taking people off the streets into accommodation, and that's all we think we need to do. And there's two things wrong with that theory. The first thing is you don't stop new people going on the streets. So there's a constant supply of people to be taken off the streets. So it's a never-ending problem, because you're only taking people off the end of the escalator while more people are getting on the bottom of the escalator. So there's no prevention about stopping people ending up on the streets. And the second part was there was no stick. We weren't trying to enforce any of the laws and rules we have about being on the streets, about especially begging, about drug taking. So we were just doing the pink and fluffy bit, which is we feel sorry for this person. Let's get him somewhere. Let's get him a B&B. Let's get him into a hotel. Let's get him accommodation. And rightly so, absolutely rightly so. And then we were just watching the problem get worse and worse and worse and worse, and not doing what needs to be done. And what needs to be done, almost everybody who works in homelessness knows what needs to be done, but hardly anybody's brave enough to talk about it because it's controversial.
Are we going back to what we were talking about earlier, the silent majority?
Absolutely. So that's when I decided to stand for election as a city centre councillor. So set up a campaign, again, funded it myself, independent. I was only standing on one issue, which was our fellow citizens sleeping in squalor on the streets in the city centre. That's all I was going to go on about if I got elected. Tried to use social media to the best that I could, got lots of stuff out there, got lots of discussions going on. But then when it came to the vote, I came nowhere. And the reason why I came nowhere, and that was a lesson I learned out of my campaign, was nobody really cares about rough sleeping. People think they do, but when push comes to shove, nobody really cares. The best example I can give you is during my campaign, someone from the city centre emailed me saying, I've seen you're running. What's your stance on cycle lanes in the city centre? I'd like to know that before I commit to vote for you. So I emailed back saying, I have no stance on cycle lanes. I will not be talking about cycle lanes one way or the other. All I'll be doing for 4 years if I'm elected will be trying to push the council to do more and more to get our fellow citizens off the streets. And he emailed back saying, thank you for your honesty. I won't be voting for you. Because his priority was cycle lanes. I'm not saying cycle lanes isn't important, but I cannot imagine a scenario where a cycle lane is more important than a fellow citizen living in a cardboard box in his own urine in an entry in Manchester city centre. I cannot fathom how that cannot be more important than cycle lanes. And it just proved to me that people really don't care. They think they do, but they don't.
Okay. Well, what do you feel about Andy Burnham's homelessness measures since he's been elected mayor 4 years ago?
So Andy Burnham stood for election with the promise of eliminating rough sleeping in Greater Manchester within his 4 years. Very brave of him to say that. Hats off that he took that topic on. and he raised the profile of rough sleeping, and and he's tried his best. But we're 5 years in now, and there's still hundreds of people sleeping rough in Greater Manchester. And he has taken hundreds of people off the streets. But it goes back to my point from 3-4 years ago. You can't end this if you're allowing people to join the escalator at the bottom. So he can take hundreds off, but it doesn't seem to make much of a difference because hundreds have joined the bottom of the escalator and have come on the streets because we're not doing anything about that. So in a harsh sort of way, Andy Burnham's failed his 4 years plan, even though he's been here 5 years now because we didn't have elections last year because of COVID. So we need to look differently at it. And Andy Burnham is just doing the same old that we've always done over the last 10 years.
Okay. How do you feel generally that the local government, the council and the Greater Manchester Authority have performed during this pandemic?
In general, or regarding homelessness?
No, in general.
In general, I'm sure they've tried their best. And I'm sure there's lots of things we can point at where they've got wrong. But do you know what? Nobody ever had a plan for this. No one saw this coming. Mm-hmm. And it'd be very unfair to criticise councils and businesses because this has impacted them. Well, of course it's impacted them. It's been a disaster for the country. I'm sure if this happens again in a couple of years, I'm sure we'll handle it so much better next time. Mm-hmm. And in one way, that's probably a blessing because COVID isn't as dangerous as we thought it was at the beginning of last year. It is dangerous, but it was not as dangerous. So if we ever get this again and we get a more dangerous strain that, it's really, it's killing hundreds of thousands of people in the UK, within days and weeks and months, I'm sure we'll handle it a lot better next time. So there's lessons to be learned. Okay.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and wish you all the best in the Mancunian Way charity. And let's hope that we can get through this COVID crisis and move forward.
I'm sure we can. I'm sure we will. I just think it's going to be. If we thought this last year was difficult, I don't think anyone's given thought about how difficult the next 5 years is going to be.
No, I think I totally agree with you there, Nick.
Yeah.